Welcome to Leadership Kung Fu with your hosts, Sandi Verrecchia and Jennifer Long.
So welcome to another episode of Leadership Kung Fu, where we sharpen your leadership skills with the wisdom and discipline of the martial arts applied to modern leadership challenges. I'm Sandi Verrecchia from Satori Consulting here in Toronto. I'm here with my co-host Jennifer Long from Own Up in Denver, Colorado. Jen, super great to see you. And I just want to take a moment before we introduce you to congratulate you on your second book, Workers Are the Solution, Not the Problem, A Guide to Leading Differently, that you co-authored with Dr. Todd Conklin. So congratulations and so great to see you.
Nice to see you, and thank you so very much. Yes, I'm very excited about the new book, and I feel it's weirdly timely. We put it together last year, and we had no idea what this year was going to look like. So it's something we'll talk about that in our next podcast.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So today we're going to dive into a powerful shift that's shaking the workplaces around the world called Conscious Un-Bossing, and how Gen Z is sort of rewriting the playbook on how we look at leadership. Forget the old school top-down boss model. This new generation isn't just asking for more flexibility and autonomy. They're challenging what leadership actually means. They want to lead differently, collaborate authentically, and create workplaces that are built on trust instead of control.
Yeah. It's a realistic ask. It's not really but a tall order, maybe, for
funny though
frameworks.
Right? Realistic ask, yet we've had this top-down model forever.
And we're in a moment in business where it feels like they all want to go back to that hardcore. Like, let's just move way back into that, because those of us who are currently managing and leading are so fed up with all of the wants and needs of the workforce, and this employer market, quote unquote, is a platform to which to do that. And it's interesting because while it feels like an employer market, people who are looking for work are still very particular about who they sign up with.
Yeah. Because the alignment to values and purpose has just come to the forefront. I sort of sit here and question sort of why our generation and the generation before us, and maybe a little bit after us, has not pushed this envelope more. Like we just did what we were supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like leadership is lazy right now. That's just the easy answer.
Yeah.
Because it's just easier if we tell people what to do, and we're exhausted.
Yes.
And your exhaustion shouldn't mean you stop being strategic. Your exhaustion, your frustration shouldn't be okay to just do the easy, lazy thing. When you're looking at the environment, what is the opportunity that you really have to do something differently? And this, I think, is one of those things that's putting pressure. It's putting pressure in because people still want to work remotely. And there's still a lot of people who are working remotely, and there are plenty of jobs who are better done remotely, right? Yeah. And so this reconciling, I think, is going to continue to go on until whatever this new formation is going to show up. And this conscious unbossing is one of these pressures that's coming through. So let's tell the listeners, for those of you who haven't heard about conscious unbossing, what the heck is that? And what does it mean, and where does it come from?
And it's different from conscious uncoupling, which was
uncoupling, which is Gwyneth Paltrow, right? Because we all thought about that.
Yeah,
those of us.
Yeah, and I think it's a catchy phrase, conscious unbossing, and I kind of love it. So what is it? It is an intentional shift from that top-down control, command and control approach to a purpose-driven, people-empowered leadership model within organizations, which sounds really simple.
Yeah, that's why I say it's reasonable.
It is reasonable. And I think when I hear this, and when I sort of talk about this with others, people are like, "What do you mean we have no leaders?" And it's not about removing leadership; it's about transforming leadership, really shifting what we think leadership is and how we show up as leaders. And so leadership becomes a verb and not a title.
Right.
right? So
Right. And that's a key thing. And I just want to say, like, transforming leadership. And when you look at this and you roll your eyes and you're like, oh my God, that is great indicators, right? This is really transformational,
yeah,
because if it's making you uncomfortable and making you question, then it's truly transformational. And so just think about that for a minute. So if you're looking to transform your culture, because I can't tell you how many clients I've had who have said we're looking for some kind of a cultural transformation. And I'm like, you do not know what you ask, because if you're not feeling uncomfortable about some of this information, you're really not looking at real transformation.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking about tweaks and changes, small little things, make them feel good. But this is holistic. And when we were talking at the outset, so I've had 2 organizations that have made this shift, tried to make this shift, one successfully, one not so successfully, but lots of learning along the way. But there's lots of larger companies. So Novo Nordisk, really big pharma company, they transformed their model to this with apparently quite, no, I don't work with them, but quite good success in terms of employee engagement and outcomes and that sort of thing. So it does happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's going on. It's going on. And so it's something to examine, because if you're really struggling with your internal culture, and you're really struggling to keep your people, and you're really struggling to get the right skills, right,
Yeah.
which so many businesses are, to entertain what this might look like. And it's a big departure. It's a big departure for some.
Huge. Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's the next adjacent next for some.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's talk about what it is in terms of maybe some core principles. So we sort of talked about purpose over power.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. That when you are doing the work, it's what is the purpose of the work? What is the point? And how does the work determine, right, what your structure should really be?
And thinking about, that whole Gen Z population, they're all about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So as they come up in the workforce, not thinking about this when they're a fairly large cohort coming up, not thinking about this now in terms of their desire to have purpose over power, I think might not serve you well.
Exactly. And so when you look at the shift in leading, right, it takes the identity of leadership and takes it from sort of the decision maker and puts it into more of a container of facilitator.
Yeah.
And you, as the leader in the group, facilitate the decision making, facilitate the forward momentum, right? So it becomes the identity of leadership, which is where that authority thing is, kind of goes away, because the authority lives within the group.
Right, because everybody has the capacity to lead. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, and so leadership has always been looked at as a learned skill,
Mm-hmm.
right? And somewhere to aspire to. But this is saying that everybody has it within them. And sure,
Right.
there's things we have to learn, but
Truly inclusive, right? And I know that's a dirty word right now, but
only in the US.
only in the US. But in work, it's a power tool. It's a power tool in decision making, in stress testing plans, in strategy. People's perspectives, experience, and understanding is always leveraged. And so this is a default dynamic that forces that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a couple of core principles. What else do we have in terms of core principles?
Core
Servant
principles.
leadership.
Let's talk about trust.
Talk about trust. Well, because trust is the biggest one.
Right.
Trust comes up as every podcast. I think we talk about trust.
Yeah.
Right? Every podcast. But this, you have to have trust at every level for this to work. Right.
Right. And so the term that came up for me that I thought was interesting is that trust becomes an operating system.
Yeah.
That it's so fundamental that it can't function without. So the need for, the other thing we always talk about too is psychological safety, right? Because people are your participation is your idea, is your contribution, is your pushback, is your questioning, all of that stuff that requires psychological safety to do, right? Is all And that's the dynamic that has to be in play for this to even work.
Right. And so let's think about this from a system perspective and trust, because most of all of the organizations that I work with have a board of directors. And all of those board of directors are 60, 70, 80-year-old people that have grown up in the command and control. And so you have somebody that comes and says, we want to do this, this conscious unbossing model. Building trust with your board is going to be incredibly important. And to build that, you need to share with them stories on how it would work, and to have them understand that it's not chaos and lack of leadership, but it's a honed sort of a designed way to get things done, as opposed to a hierarchical way of getting things done.
Right. Because one of the other fundamental principles is you have to have what is called a mature accountability system.
Yes.
Right. There's high and accountability shows up in any kind of teaming format. And this is very much self-managed teaming, similar, adjacent, same kind of concept. Is the accountability maturity is fundamental, because you have to be able to make decisions, create impact, create bottom line, whatever the purpose point, right, is. You're all accountable, and no one is more or less accountable. Where leaders are always like, oh, my name's on it. It's like, no, everyone's name's on it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You have to. So accountability, and we've talked about that many on our many podcasts, is a key piece to making it work.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that accountability is in its raw form is, fairly easy, because I know that you teach this all the time, but not well practiced in organizations. And so how do you have those difficult conversations on a team where there's no hierarchy, right? So how does one team member, a peer, have that tough conversation? And so those skills need to be taught within organizations to make this work.
Right, because all the stuff that we kind of go into becomes the nature of the work, right? In the sense that the dynamic of the inclusiveness, the dynamic of accountability, the dynamic of trust, the dynamic of productive conflict, all play together and are what you'd call table stakes.
Right. Yeah.
For functionality.
But they don't, and sort of one of the things when I was reading on this is not all teams are sort of equipped for this. And so one of my examples of one of my clients, all of their teams, except for one, was doing really well. And the team that wasn't doing well in this, they struggled with what they thought was lack of leadership support for them, because although they're still leaders, they didn't feel that they were there for them the same way, that they needed more of a framework for decision making, that they didn't have the support to engage in those difficult conversations. So I think when you're embarking on this sort of thing, we need to remember that not everybody's the same, right? So so pilot and try, but keeping a close tab on what's going on to ensure that everybody has the right tools.
Right. And how is that shared learning going? Because I think when people sort of do this self-reflection on how is this working and not working, where do they struggle? And that might show up differently for different people. And how does that go into your strategy for how you develop for this, how you plan for this, how you migrate to this, how you leverage it? Because it's a powerful experience. And the interesting thing is, and what we all know is that being part of a really good team is some of the best work we'll ever do.
Oh, totally.
Some of the best work we'll ever do. And I can't, to equate that with how we're all struggling with burnout and all the things in the work environment. I mean, this is a reasonable strategy to go to, because it answers so much mail around engagement, around burnout, it's an interesting thing to consider. But it is, you leaders have to let go. You have to let go and let the group work together. And so we were in our pre-wrap, we were talking, it's very tribal. It's very, everybody's got to bring to the party there. No one gets off the hook. And in that, you get better as a person. Your skill set grows because you're getting trained all the time from your group on how to show up.
Right.
Because you guys are setting the standards together. Your feedback is swift
Mm-hmm.
and immediate.
Yeah. Yeah. And the shared learning from a skill set perspective, from a leadership perspective, is good and positive, but also the shared learning of the actual doing of the work, right? Because often the roles are siloed, even in departments. Having to make group decisions shares the learning of all of the jobs as well. So it really doesn't have a downside when everybody goes, no, wow, I didn't know that. Whereas
Well,
you may not.
right? The downside might be if you're particularly ambitious. The downside might
Yes.
be this is a selfless experience.
Yes.
And that if you're concerned about you and your career and your mobility and your recognition and you're driven from that place, you're not going to like it.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
That
For
would be the
sure.
downside, right? Is I'm not a fit because I'm tied to a bunch of people
Mhm.
and I don't like that. I don't
Yes.
like having to be the result of a group dynamic as opposed to in control of
Yes. Yeah.
my own destiny, my own result.
Yeah. Yeah. Another downside might be, or, no, a challenge,
Yeah.
cautionary tale, perhaps, is that the lack of clarity could breed chaos. So there, that I like the word frameworks. There does need to be frameworks around this, that it's not just everybody going off and doing whatever the hell they want to do.
Yeah. It's not
And
unstructured.
it's not unstructured, although it feels like it's unstructured, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's like, I don't have to check in with you on everything I do. You don't have to prove everything I do. So it is not about unstructured, but so the frameworks have to be there. Um, because if there isn't the structure, teams will become unaligned and probably feel a little bit directionless.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. We also talked about the fact that, um, this really like what does if there's it's not leaderless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does leadership show up in this kind of an environment?
Yeah.
And um as leadership development people, as coaches, right, we know that leaders live everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? Leading is a capability,
Yeah.
not a title. Leading, um leadership is taken, not given, right? And so it's this is where your experience, your knowledge, your know-how, and your social capital show up.
Yeah.
And those who have those, and you should have social capital as a leader. You should have that kind of experience and know-how because people will defer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how we're wired. It's like, oh, they know this thing. Let's listen in on that. And people may lead at different parts in a project that may
Right.
rotate through a group. That may be today we're focused on this aspect. Well, so and so's got that background, so let's really lean in on them to run this thing and lead us through the thinking, right? So it gives everybody opportunity to show up as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the dynamic of when you understand the social interactions and how to create the capital and move people forward and facilitate well, right? That's all going to show up in how that team is led because someone in the room will do that.
Right, right. It's interesting because I'm working with a team now. Some of them have some direct reports, most of them don't. So they're emerging leaders. Next step is a leadership team lead sort of position, and many of them struggle with that whole concept of I don't have direct reports, so therefore I'm not a leader.
Yeah.
And sharing that concept with them is you can be a leader anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Help facilitate a session. You're leading it.
Yeah.
So you need to, for them, it's redefining what leadership means and to be a leader,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
empowering people to engage when they can and to step up when they can.
Well, and because this kind of structure, one of the tenets that has to live there is the group ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they really have to own all of the things. They have to own their structure. They have to own their dynamic. They have to own their rules of play. They have to own their outcomes together.
Right.
And that level of how does what we're doing drive business, right? There's a
Yeah.
direct understanding of how you drive business. It's not a mystery what your job is and how that impacts.
Yes.
You know exactly what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that you just said that I want to sort of tease out a little bit more is that, what did you call, you didn't call them rules of engagement. You said
rules of play.
Rules of play. And sitting down and consciously going through, what does that mean for us as a team? That's a table stake. That is, if you need to do that so that people are clear, and it also allows for accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it holds people accountable. And if we say we're going to act this way, then I can now have that conversation with you, Jen, because you're not acting the way we said we were going to act. And so
exactly. And it's not that hard. I mean, people always look at it like, oh my God, that seems so foreign. And it's like, look you sit down and play Monopoly, and the first thing you do is read the rules. The first thing you do are how many dice rolls do we get? And that's all you're doing is, right, you're putting your list of rules on the box lid. If we're going to get together, what do I need to know?
Yes. Yeah. And you need to really think about your team purpose and values, so that aligning with anchoring your team. And so you're talking about those, how do we align with the business and the outcomes, but there's also the values of your team. And there's also the purpose, the clear purpose of why we are a team, of why we're working together. So there's some things that I think are sort of that before you down this path that really need to get done.
Yeah. Yeah. Where I think the more interesting thing is strategically, what kind of advantage this would actually give so many businesses, because there's so much, you've got a lot of smart people in your organization.
Yeah.
Right. Where the people are just sitting on the sidelines, who could be doing so much better and so much more. I mean, in a period of time where the economy looks so interesting, to start to leverage people who, right, at the front line of your business, and who see things differently, and it's an interesting opportunity. And while it sounds a lot of woo woo and who could and really, but I think that's where, when you are automatically in a place of judgment around something you've never ever experienced and haven't probably really thought about, sit down and look at it. Really go do the legwork on thinking through what this actually might bring to your organization. Maybe not the whole thing, but maybe try it in this part. And there's a lot of companies who are, due to tariffs, due to whatever, especially in the US, right, where things are fundamentally changing. There's a lot of businesses who are becoming integrated into different industries, who are absorbing. And these kinds of ideas and how you formulate and move forward in new markets could give you a huge advantage.
Well, the word innovation comes to mind. And every strategic plan I've written in the last 6 months, it's like, we need more innovation. So you have this pool of employees that can innovate together, likely younger, likely thinking differently than, the older contingent.
Right.
Like, innovation is at your fingertips when you
allow it to breathe. This is how it actually gets done.
Right.
And stop being afraid of the structure.
Yep.
Right. It doesn't. And this is why, traditional business and innovation centers have always been separate, because the structure for innovation is fundamentally different.
Yeah.
This structure is fundamentally different. And so if innovation is the answer to how do we move forward in this next dynamic of business, this is exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Because it not only answers the mail for your business and your strategy, it answers the mail for the people you're out there hiring who want a different environment. And we haven't even really talked about the fact that, conscious unbossing is also closely related to, I don't want the management job.
Right? They don't want the hassle of it.
Because there's people in my organization who are like, I don't want that much stress. I don't want that pain. I don't want that role.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So they don't want to be bosses, and the Gen Z, they don't want bosses, right? They want mentors. They want coaches. They want collaborators.
Right.
That's
right. They want to learn shoulder to shoulder. They don't want to be told what to do. Yeah. And they want to be recognized for their ideas and contributions.
And I think
right off the bat,
really fair. Right off the bat, right? There's no
right off the bat. Like, don't tell me to sit in the meeting and watch. I don't have a 6-month ramp up, right? I want to feel valuable in the door.
Yes.
And the only way I'm going to feel valuable in the door is to get that immediate feedback, to get that immediate, and to get the immediate growth from the people who understand the business, right?
Right.
That shoulder to shoulder thing really becomes very dynamic. Onboarding people, you're not just relying on one person. Tom, can you please onboard Vicky? It's everybody on the team has to onboard the new person in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
Which also just builds on relationships quicker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's why I'm like, God, it just seems like it's a really realistic thing. But for those hanging on to power, those hanging on to control, those hanging on to, I've had to fight for this, right? I've had to work my way up. What do you mean? Right. But that is where, stop talking about, I want to transform something, and then be the person who's like, but if that takes away what I need or want, and it's not about me, you're the problem.
Right.
Right. And you're not going to transform.
And for all of the people that are listening to this podcast going, this is, I'm not giving up my job to this, we're not for a second suggesting that a shift like this is an easy shift, right? It is got to be planful. It needs to be engaging with many, like it takes time to shift the transformation, the practice of Kung Fu, all that sort of thing that we're tying it together. But the upside, I think, is can be monumentous.
Yeah. And so I think the message here is do the thinking about it.
Right.
Open at least open the box, right? And explore what that is. And I'm sitting on my desk are a couple of books that have been around for a while that give you a sense of it, right? What does it look like in a business, and what are there? And I love me some Gary Hamel and his whole book called Humanocracy.
Yes.
Right. Creating organizations as amazing as the people inside them. Talks about organizations who've done it. Right. And he's academic. He's got all the inside, the how-tos, the good stories and the horror stories. Right. It's a really interesting read. And as leaders, part of your Kung Fu should always be, what are you reading?
Yeah.
What are you exposing yourself to that's so outside the realm that can feed your own understanding and feed your own? So I really highly recommend that book. And then one that I picked up ages ago is this one called The Social Leadership Handbook by a guy named Julian Stodd. And it's a very interesting model around leading. It's a big circle. You can't really see it.
I hadn't put that one. Oh,
here's his book. Right. And what he does a really good job of talking about social capital in the community and how that works, and a whole technology bent in there. And so really good frameworks to start to think it through yourself and where that might apply, and to really understand the shift in the nature of work and workers, because it's not going away, and the command and control thing is just going to be a pressure point.
Right.
And so are you going to tolerate it, or are you actually going to move forward and doing something different? Because they're not going to change who they are as people.
No, and I think you're right. And that whole social leadership is around people sort of stepping up saying, no, I belong here versus I work here. And that's a real shift in how people are showing up and thinking about their employment. It's not just a paycheck, but somewhere where you're aligned with your purpose aligns with their purpose, and you feel like you're part of something bigger.
Right. And when we talk about my book next week, we can talk about a lot of some of the things that, when we hear leadership teams struggling with, how do I keep people? How do I find people? And what all the drama is around that whole thing is getting leaders to really break their brains on some of the models that we've been under for so long that just don't work anymore.
Yep.
And taking advantage of some of these new ideas and structures. And it is a selfless act. And for those who have been in generations of work your way up and earn it to go into this kind of a flatter structure, I think you'd be surprised at how fulfilling it really is.
For sure. Yeah. I think there's a lot of benefit to, as you say, opening the box and exploring this. If you're going to be successful long term, we really need to think about that next generation of people that are coming up and what they want. And it is different. Like everybody's talked about, the Gen X's were different, and baby boomers were different. Everybody's been different, but this one, they are truly different.
Yeah.
And
that's why it's scary.
Forward,
yeah.
We got to be so, human-centered design, I think, is like when you're thinking about what does that mean for your organization, values and purpose alignment with your organization. It's a cultural transformation, and change takes time. So plan for it.
Well, and I think part of it too is, and I could get my son, who is the anthropological genius, to come in and talk about the whole nature of tribe and tribal thinking. But I do feel like this, this individualistic culture is kind of a weird, interesting background against a drive toward more connectedness and community, and everybody being adding that value. That my individual drive isn't because it's all about me. My individual drive is because my need to be connected to all of you is more powerful.
Yeah.
And
about we, not me.
Yeah. And it might feel a little too community centered. There's some, right? And I think that's there's a social implication. I think all of our work is not separated from our lives the way we think it is.
Right. And I think, that whole personal paradigms of how we see things, because when you say, what you just said, I think a whole lot of people sitting in a circle and singing Kumbaya. And that is not.
No, that is not it at all, because we love to solve problems. That's a human thing. We get excited about that. And when you get to do it with people without hierarchy, it's dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a lot of things that people could start playing with this. Conscious unbossing. Unbossing. That's uncoupling.
Yes. Yeah. The new distaste for management.
The new distaste for management. Yeah. And hey, if you're structured this way where you've got, middle management, up the yin yang, if people don't want it, you're really going to struggle. And so maybe it's time to pilot and measure and look at successes and measuring success in a different way.
Right. It will test all of your Kung Fu skills.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
All right. On that note, I guess read the books, open the box, explore. And for those of you who've actually experienced it, would love to hear your comments. Would love to have a conversation about that. For those of you who had it and loved it, and those of you who've had it and hated it, let's talk about both sides of the equation, because it harmonizes with what I think the world needs going forward, with what business has been looking for that hasn't been able to find it, but is too scared to do.
Right.
And I think it's worth your time and attention, leaders. Yeah,
for sure. So please share this podcast with your friends and your colleagues. Maybe it's something that you can listen to at a work event and start thinking about it and start brainstorming. Share your comments. We have lots of other podcasts, 60 or so, that you can listen to on all sorts of different topics. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening. Thanks for downloading. For those of you who do it consistently, really, really appreciate you. And we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Sandi.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandi's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And you can check out Jen's website at accountabilityatwork.com. If you like what you hear, let us know by leaving a review on your favorite listening platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.